All right, we're talking about the top NHL bounce back players thus far this year. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt. Welcome to the Sin Bin, the YouTube hockey channel where we do a lot of hockey talking, a lot of hockey commentary. And today I'm coming off the heels of doing a Kevin Fiala video where I said how I thought Kevin Fiala was having a great bounce back here. And it got me thinking, what are other NHL players that were having a great bounce back here before the whole break happened? So I'm going to take this video, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about NHL hockey players who I thought were having a great bounce back here. And when I say bounce back, you can replace it with breakout, whatever word you want. Basically, the year before, or before that, or before that, they weren't doing that great. And this year, they were having a great redeeming year, whether it be in their quality of play, whether it be in their stats. So I'm going to take this video to talk a little bit about those players. All right. One last thing before I get in. This isn't in any order whatsoever. I know in the past I've done top 10 videos. This isn't in any order whatsoever. I didn't feel like ranking them. I think that a bounce back here, it's hard to rank that. So this isn't in any order. All right. Without further ado, why don't we get in? And I teased him on the thumbnail of this video. So why don't we talk a little bit about Jakob Markstrom and the type of season he's having for the Vancouver Canucks. All right, this is a little sideline thing, but did you realize how before the Vancouver Canucks used to write Vancouver on their jersey? I'm really glad they got rid of that. That's sort of weird. You know, no other city writes like Philadelphia above their jersey. Anyway, going back to Jakob Markstrom though, he was actually drafted by the Florida Panthers, okay? I remember when he first broke into the NHL, he was supposed to be the next greatest NHL goalie prospect, and he was drafted 31st overall in the second round of the 2008 NHL draft. Now, although he was touted as being, the next best thing, he never really broke out with the Florida Panthers. Actually, he was quite disappointing, and that led him to being traded to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, as you can see on the good old Hockey DB, love this website. He started off with the Vancouver Canucks, only played 4 games, had an 868 save percentage, not really good whatsoever. And the next year, 3 games, 879, he was sort of having a timid start with the Vancouver Canucks. But ever since then, he's been very solid, a 915, 910, 912. And this past year, before the whole break happened, the 2019-2020 season, he had a 918 save percentage. I mean, Patrick Raw once said, if you want to be an elite goalie in this year, this was back when he was coaching the Colorado Avalanche, he said, you need to have around a 920. And that's exactly what Jakob Markstrom has. But most of all, I think that there's a lot of games. This might not reflect in his stats, but I think he was absolutely stealing games for the Vancouver Canucks. The first one that comes to mind was that night they had the ceremony for the Sedin twins. I'm forgetting who the opponent was, but I remember watching that game, and he absolutely stood on his head, and he had something crazy like a 45 save shutout. And I think there's been a lot of games like that where Jakob Markstrom has really stood on his head, and I think he was injured before the break. So this is sort of a good thing. There's nothing really good about the NHL break, but one good thing is that it's allowing teams to get much more healthy. Hopefully that Jakob Markstrom could get healthy and help those Vancouver Canucks get to the playoff spot. I'm not in any way a Vancouver fan, but hey, seeing Canadian teams in the playoffs, I would like that. All right, our next player. And why don't we stay in Vancouver? And I promise we'll get to the other teams, but just staying in Vancouver, JT Miller. Or TJ Miller, whatever he's called. He has shit on his face. All right, JT Miller. I remember when he was back with the New York Rangers, and I see a lot of Rangers games, my team being in the Eastern Conference. He was always a good player. He was always a very decent player, but I would never categorize him as necessarily being elite, quote unquote. Well, this past season with the Vancouver Canucks, he's been nothing short of elite. If I were to pull up his HockeyDB page, in 69 games, and I'm sorry because it's loading here. In 69 games, he's had 72 points. That's over a point per game for those of you who suck in math. And this is sort of coming to me as a surprise because while he's been good in the past, you see here a 56-point season, that's not bad. He's also had a 47-point season before with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I remember back in the offseason when he was traded to the Vancouver Canucks, that was sort of a controversial thing. A lot of people were attacking the Vancouver GM. They were saying, hey, man, what are you doing? You're giving up way too much for this JT Miller guy. Well, I think if you look back on that trade, I don't think you guys are regretting it now. And I think it's sort of going to be the same effect with Tyler Toffoli. I know a lot of people are disappointed. You guys had to give up Madden to get Tyler Toffoli. I think that when you see him play with the Vancouver Canucks, and they have such a high octane offensive team, with the likes of Elias Peterson, with the likes of, a Brock Besser, those types of guys, I think it's a good place for a lot of stars to break out. And that was the case with JT Miller. He was a first round pick, I believe. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, first round pick, 15th overall. So he obviously has that talent. He has that skill set. And the good thing about JT Miller is he's relatively young, 27 years old. He's right in his prime. So you Canucks, you're getting a lot of good seasons out of JT Miller, and you're getting him at a really decent price. $5 million until the 2022-2023 season. That's a very decent price for a guy who's going to get over a point per game. So I really like the type of season JT Miller is having. And being the fantasy pool player that I am, if I were to give myself the award for the best breakout draft pick, hey, I drafted JT Miller like in the 7th round. So that was something incredible on my part, humble brag. But that's all I had to say about JT Miller. All right, like I promised, let's get out of Vancouver. And we're going to the New York Rangers, and we're talking about Tony DeAngelo. He was also with the Tampa Bay Lightning, earlier in his career. Tampa Bay, what are you doing giving up all these good players? They're obviously in a salary cap hell, so they don't really have a choice. But when you look at Tony DeAngelo, I think the type of season that he's having is sort of caught everyone by surprise, all right? 68 games played, 53 points. So he was on pace sort of for that, 60, 70 point range, if my quick math serves me right. The thing with Tony DeAngelo, I didn't know much about this player. Like I said, he was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was also drafted in the first round. I feel like they have a really, really good scouting system there in Tampa. But drafted in the first round, 2014 NHL draft. He's only 24 years old. All right, so you're getting him well into his prime here. The Tony DeAngelo. He probably hasn't even hit his prime yet. 53 points in 68 games for a defenseman. That's nothing short of elite. I don't think there's any team at this point who wouldn't want a guy like Tony DeAngelo on their team. I think that if I were to point out some things like the weakest parts of his game, he's not an overly large player, okay? He's only, 5'11", 180 pounds, which as a defenseman, absorbing those big hits when you go and retrieve pucks on the boards, that could sort of suck. But let me tell you something. One thing that's relatively surprised me about Tony DeAngelo, this guy plays with an edge. Don't let the small stature fool you. This guy, his Italian blood, I don't know what it is, but this guy plays with an edge. And if you guys don't believe me, go and look up that fight he had with Kyle Okposo. I think it was 2 years ago, where he absolutely one-punch knocked out Kyle Okposo. So he plays with an absolute edge, but most importantly, he has a quality that very few NHL players, and even less, very few NHL defensemen have in the NHL, and that is just the power to take over games. He had an absolute ridiculous 5-point game earlier this year where he had a hat trick. I remember because he's also in my pool. So, Tony DeAngelo, congratulations. You're having one hell of a season. I'd hate to see what he's going to cost the New York Rangers because I believe he's a restricted free agent at the end of this year. Yeah, he's a restricted free agent. So, he's going to cost them a pretty penny if he keeps up this level of play when they return from the break. All right, so enough with Tony DeAngelo. Why don't we talk about our next player? And our next player is Bryan Rust. Now, I'm going to admit to you guys, I'm basing this one a little bit more on the stats because I don't know much about Bryan Rust. I don't see a whole lot of Pittsburgh Penguins, but if you were to just look at your stats here, 56 points in 55 games. Again, over a point per game. And for a guy who's only being paid $3.5 million, that is borderline miraculous. I've been hearing from a lot of Pittsburgh fans, he's sort of the replacement of Chris Kunitz. Chris Kunitz, he's sort of Crosby's bitch boy, for lack of a better term. Well, I shouldn't call him that. He's actually a good player in his own right. But I've sort of heard that Bryan Rust, he's sort of that replacement for Chris Kunitz, a guy who's a serviceable two-way forward. He's not going to wow you with his skill. But if you look at his points this year, you look at that, you say, wow, this is actually a really skilled player. Again, not going to wow you with his size. But when I look at Bryan Rust, he's having a great year and drafted in the 3rd round, 80th overall. That's another very, very good draft by the Pittsburgh Penguins, who I also think has a very good scouting system. maybe less so in the past years, but they do have a very good scouting system. We'll get to them a little bit later because it's not done for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's never good getting injured as a team as a whole, but the one bright side about getting injured is that some of the players can come out of nowhere and just step up into those shoes that are missing and fill those shoes. And that was a great example with Brian Rust. And why don't we just get to the next one, okay? Because I wanted to talk a little bit about Tristan Jarry. Now, I don't believe Matt Murray was injured at any point this season. He may have been. He always gets injured, Matt Murray. But the thing with Matt Murray, he wasn't playing the best hockey, especially earlier on this season. I think it's placed itself back together a little bit, but earlier on this season, Matt Murray was absolutely abysmal. So the Pittsburgh coach, Mike Sullivan, he said, hey, this guy isn't working. Why not try the next guy? I think that with goalies in the NHL, it's really about show me what's happening now. Who's hot now? Play the hot hand. And that's exactly what they did with Tristan Jarry, who's having an absolute bonkers year. If I were to look at his stats, 921 save percentage. 921 save percentage. That is one of the top save percentage in the whole NHL. If you look at the goalies this year in the NHL, it's sort of been all over the place. You see guys of the like of Darcy Kemper, guys of the likes of Tristan Jarry, Elvis Merzlikins. These guys come out of nowhere. And surprisingly, the top paid goalies, guys like Carey Price, guys like Bobrovsky, they are not in the top 10 when it comes to stats, it's just a lesson, guys. Don't overpay for goalies. But back to Tristan Jarry, I think that there's games this year where he absolutely stood on his head. And again, I picked him up in the pool. I didn't originally draft him. Obviously, no one saw this coming. Drafted in the second round, 44th overall. That's actually pretty high for a goalie, And again, like I said, a 921 save percentage. That's very, very incredible. The last thing I wanted to say about Jarry is that I've sort of got a bone to pick with the Pittsburgh Penguins because I feel like recently they've been relying more heavily on Matt Murray. And I think that's more of like a bias that he's the guy that led them to 2 Stanley Cups in the past, back to back. So they've been sort of going back to Matt Murray. And I remember watching some games, their latest games before the break against the Washington Capitals, where I didn't think Matt Murray was all that good. I just feel like shaking the coach and telling him, go back to Tristan Jarry. This is Jarry's time. This is Jarry's year. Stop relying on Matt Murray. I know in the past he's been really good, but if you look at this year alone, just go with the hot hand. Go with Tristan Jarry. I think lately they haven't been playing Tristan enough, and that's something I'd really like to see from the Pittsburgh management. So I get it. Matt Murray won you guys all of those cups. He's been a very good player in the past, but right now it's Jarry time, baby. All right. I talked a little bit about that Washington Capitals game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's obviously a very big rivalry. One player who's really stepped up for the Washington Capitals, Jakob Markstrom. All right, Jakob Markstrom, another player I didn't know much about, but what I did know, it's sort of incredible. He's a very, very, very fast player. He has a lot of finesse, He's not the type of gonna go crash in the boards, gonna dive face first to block his shots. He's more of a finesse player, which we see a lot with these European players, but that's not a bad thing, all right? Again, not a bad thing. Not an overly big guy. While he is 6 foot, he's only 195 pounds, but he does have a lot of skill, and his draft position definitely shows that off. 13th overall. It definitely shows that he has a lot of skill. And this year, 52 points in 69 games, 25 of those are goals. It gives the Washington Capitals a lot of depth because we all know they have that high skill, high-end octane skill, like the Ovechkins, like the Backstroms, like the Kuznetsov. But in order to succeed as a team, which they have in the past, but in order to succeed again, they need to have that depth. And a guy like Jakob Markstrom, I think he's that perfect second, third line player for any team who wants to make a great run for the cup. And I think he's having an absolute great year for the Washington Capitals. Again, giving them that depth that they really need. If you're a team, we're seeing it with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll talk a little bit about them later. We're seeing it with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's not enough to have a really, really good top 6 or a top 3. It's not enough to have a really good first line. You need to have some of that depth. And I think that a guy like Jakob Markstrom, he gives the Washington Capitals some of that depth. And you're not paying a pretty price for him. He's only making $3.3 million. So that's really good for the Washington Capitals. All right. Enough about Jakob Markstrom. Why don't we get to our next player? And our next player, I sort of teased it with my shirt, didn't I? Travis Konechny. Now, out of all of the players I've listed so far on this list, to be redundant, I don't think there would be any team in the NHL that wouldn't want a guy like Travis Konechny. Think about it, all right? He's got speed. He's got skill. He's got grit. He hits. He'll fight if need be. He wants to win. He's got character. I watch a lot of Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know why. I don't particularly like them. I don't even know why I got this shirt. It was on special, actually. It was Wayne Simmons got traded, so it only costed like $5. But anyway, back to Travis Konechny. I watched this guy play. Think of him sort of as a Brendan Gallagher. Maybe a little bit less grit, but a little bit more skill. All right? He has an excellent shot. He's got surprisingly excellent hands. I know he scored a goal, I think it was a year or two ago, where he just undressed the Boston Bruins. That was really nice to see. But, Travis Konechny, the type of season he's having, is nowhere short of elite. Hell, I've seen him play enough. I'm going to put him in that elite category. In 66 games played, he's had 61 points. At this point, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say it. I apologize, Philadelphia Flyers, if I'm wrong, but I think he's sort of the face of the franchise. And if you guys don't think so, I think in the next couple of years coming, he's going to quickly become the face of the franchise because he's easily a guy you can get behind. He's got that character. He's very funny. He looks like a guy who chirps a lot. He's got that want to win. He's got the will to win. And his year so far in the stats category, it's been absolutely amazing. Almost a point per game. He's been through a little bit of slumps, but overall, he's been very consistent this year. He's been drafted in the first round. A thing that we see a lot so far on this list, a lot of first round picks who maybe they're a little bit late bloomers. We're so used to seeing nowadays in the NHL players, they just come in and right off they have an impact. Guys like Matthews, guys like Laine. It's rare we see guys like, I shouldn't say it's rare, but we don't really expect it anymore to see guys being late bloomers. I think that guys like Travis Konechny is a late bloomer. And one thing that I wanted to point out, he was drafted in the 2015 NHL draft. Yeah, the 2015. That is quickly becoming, in my opinion, the best draft class in the NHL history. I know a lot of people talk about 2003, but in my opinion, if you look at 2015 and the type of players that came out of that draft, in later positions too, guys like Mikko Rantanen, you look at him, you probably think he was a top 5 pick. He wasn't. He was like more close to 10. Timo Meier came out of this draft. Travis Konechny, Provorov, Thomas Chabot, and let's not talk about Connor McDavid. Very, very deep draft, Mitch Marner. So I think the 2015 draft is going to go in the history as one of the deepest drafts. And guys like Travis Konechny is the reason why. Absolutely love Travis Konechny. My apologies. Our next player, and I got to admit, I said so with Brian Rust, but when it comes to our next player, I haven't really seen him play. All right, so I just wanted to warn you guys ahead of time. I haven't really seen him play. I don't watch a lot of Colorado Avalanche games, but I just looked at his stats sheets, and I gotta say, he's having a great year. All right, and I'm talking about this guy. Now I show you his face. I bet a lot of people don't know who it is. I'll show him again. This guy, he's got a nice face, probably gets a lot of girls. His name is Ryan Graves, and although you might not know his name right off, I think you definitely will in the future. All right, let me pull up his HockeyDB page. All right, let's not forget, this is a top bounce back list. A lot of people, a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, they would have said Ryan Graves, he's a very good serviceable AHL player. All right. A lot of people are saying he's destined for the AHL, probably me included had I known about him. When you look at him now, sure, he's not like super elite in the terms of like a Victor Hedman, of a John Carlson, who I could have easily added on this list, by the way, okay? But if you look at the fact that a lot of people saw him as a perennial AHL player, and this year, he's not only succeeding in the NHL, he's thriving. I think that categorizes as a bounce back player, and I gotta put him in my list. I just had to put him in my list. The points won't jump off the board. 26 points, 69 games. But I will say, he does play a lot of big minutes for the Colorado Avalanche. And let's look at one particular stats. Look at those plus minuses. He's a plus 40. A plus 40. That's one of the best plus minuses in the NHL. I know a lot of you guys, you don't put a lot of emphasis on plus minus. You guys can go fuck yourself. I think it's a really good, important stat. You're on the ice for a goal against, you get a minus. You're on the ice for a goal plus, you get a plus. I mean, it's a very straightforward stats. I don't know why a lot of people don't put a lot of stock in it, but I do. I definitely do. And when you look at Ryan Graves, the fact that he has a positive, plus minus. Okay, sure. He's on a very solid team, the Colorado Avalanche. But you got to give credit where credit is due. This guy plays a very sound defensive game. And again, not too many teams wouldn't want a guy like Ryan Graves. All right, we're going to get to our last player. A player who I almost entirely forgot about until like the end of me making this list. But I just had to add him at the last second. And that is, he may not have the best haircut. William Nylander. He looks like that guy in Spring Breakers, James Franco. Anyway, William Nylander, he's been the subject of a lot of criticism. All right? The year before this, the 2018-2019 season, very, very bad year. He only had 27 points, albeit in 54 games. The reason why he played so few games is because he had that standout where he didn't even play with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They were sort of in contract negotiations. And a lot of people were saying, after he received that contract, that it's too much money. You gave too much money for a guy like William Nylander. And I was certainly one of those people who thought so. He makes about $7 million, or $6.9 million if you want to be technical. And for a guy who, it seemed like he was going to plateau at 60 points, I thought that was a little bit of an overpayment. I mean, sure, he's going to give you a lot of points, but he's not particularly a goal scorer, which we all know goal scoring will get you a bigger contract than just simply passing. He's not he'll score like 20 goals, right? He doesn't play a sound defensive game. He's not physical. He's not going to jump in front of shots to block them. So I was one of those people who said, hey, $7 million, that's too much for William Nylander. And the type of season he had last year, it was pretty abysmal. I would have said he was probably the worst player, in terms of where the expectations are set and where he ended up delivering. One of the worst players. If you look at the type of season he's having this year, it's a great bounce back season. All right, 68 games played, 59 points. He finally crossed that like 20 goal category. He's all of a sudden a 30 goal scorer, showing off some of that shooting skill. Good looking guy too. I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs, hey, a lot of you still might not like that contract, and I'm certainly one of those people who look at that contract and I'm still like, you know what, it's a lot of money. But if he keeps playing these types of minutes for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if he keeps putting up those type of points, I don't think too many people are going to be arguing. Maybe more so with Mitch Marner, maybe more so with John Tavares. But for a guy like William Nylander, who say he gets 70 points a year, 70, 75 points, at $7 million, that's really good. That's really good. And you guys got to remember that in Toronto, every player is going to command a bigger contract because of the whole tax situation and just the Canadian dollar in general. So at $7 million, I know a lot of people lump him in the category of like Matthews is overpaid, Marner's overpaid, Tavares is overpaid. I think that slowly but surely, if he continues to have this type of season, he's going to move away from that category, and we're going to stop lumping Nylander in that category where we're going to say he's overpaid. I think he's been great stats-wise. I would like to see a little bit more from him, especially when it comes to the playoffs. It's good to do it in the regular season. I want to see you do it in the playoffs. Very bad playoff numbers. 7 games played, 3 points, 4 points. I want to see him do it in the playoffs. Anyway, I hope you guys like this video. Who am I forgetting? I didn't talk about Kevin Fiala because I made a whole separate video about him. But if I'm forgetting someone, please mention their name. Who do you think had the best bounce back season this year or thus far in the NHL? So please let me know. And as usual, please subscribe to the Sin Bin where we do a lot of NHL talking, trying to keep you guys entertained during the break. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the notification bell. Without further ado, my name is Matt. Keep your stick on.